They say love is the purest thing on earth. But when mixed with pride, pain, and desperation, love can turn into something unrecognizable. This is the story of two sisters, Grace and Mary. One lives in the glittering city of Atlanta, surrounded by everything money can buy. The other lives in a quiet farmhouse in Georgia, where the air smells of rain and the heart still values family over fortune. They share the same blood, the same smile, the same childhood memories, but not the same fate. Grace has everything, except a child. Mary has little, but she has love, a husband, and a peaceful home. One visit, one conversation, would change everything between them. Because that day, Grace made a request no sister could refuse. She asked Mary to carry a child for her. It sounded like a promise of love, a sacred act between family. But behind Grace's tears and Mary's kindness, destiny was already writing a different story, one of sacrifice, betrayal, and the price of trust. Before the end, hearts would be broken, loyalties tested, and the meaning of family rewritten forever. Because sometimes, the promises made in love become the wounds we never forget. This is the promise of Grace. Before we begin this journey, I want to ask you something. Have you ever made a promise, one that came from love, only to watch that same promise break your heart? If you have, then this story will speak to you in ways words alone cannot. This isn't just a story about two sisters. It's about the choices we make when life corners us, the moments when love demands more than we're ready to give. It's about what happens when pride stands where forgiveness should have been, and when the line between right and wrong begins to fade. Because sometimes, doing the right thing can still cost you everything. So, as you listen to the promise of Grace, I invite you to open your heart. Let every moment remind you of someone you once trusted. Someone you once believed in. Someone who changed your life, for better or for worse. And if this story moves you, if you believe love is both beautiful and dangerous, don't just watch in silence. Comment below and tell us. What's the biggest promise you've ever made, and did it heal you, or break you? Like, share, and subscribe, not just for another story, but for every soul who has ever loved, lost, and still dared to believe again. Because in the end, love isn't about how it begins. It's about what survives. Before everything changed, life was simple. Before promises and heartbreak, there were just two sisters, Grace and Mary, bound by love, distance, and fate. Grace Johnson was the eldest. A woman carved by ambition, living in the heart of Atlanta, a city that never sleeps, where dreams shine brighter than the stars. At 40, she was everything the world called successful, a CEO of her own interior design firm, owner of a luxury home, and wife to a quiet, wealthy man who traveled more than he stayed. But success had its silence. Grace's home was filled with art, not laughter. With gold, not giggles. With the ticking of clocks instead of the cries of a child. Doctors said she couldn't have one. That news broke her in ways money could never fix. Mary Walker, her younger sister, lived 3 hours south, in a small Georgia town surrounded by cotton fields and pine trees. She was the opposite of Grace, simple, soft-spoken, married to a mechanic named Daniel. Their home was tiny, but full of life, mismatched plates, the smell of cornbread, gospel music on Sunday mornings, and laughter that carried through open windows. Grace and Mary hadn't seen each other in nearly 5 years. Not out of hatred, but out of unspoken distance. Grace's world spun too fast, and Mary's too slow, like two clocks ticking in different rooms. But no matter how far apart they lived, the memories never faded. Sharing a single blanket as little girls, whispering dreams under candlelight, promising to never let the world change them. Only, the world did change them. Grace became the woman people admired, and Mary, the one people forgot. Still, when Grace's call came one quiet evening, her voice trembling, saying, "Mary. I need you." Mary didn't hesitate. Because that's what love does. It answers, even when the past says you shouldn't. Mary didn't know that this visit, this one simple act of kindness, would test everything she believed about love, family, and forgiveness. And Grace. She didn't know that asking her sister for help would awaken a storm neither of them could ever escape. It had been 5 long years since Grace last visited the countryside. When her black SUV turned off the highway and rolled down that familiar dirt road, memories began to rise, the laughter, the fights, the smell of home. Mary stood on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron as the car came to a stop. For a second, time froze. The city sister and the country sister, staring at each other with a mix of love, guilt, and wonder. "Grace?" Mary whispered. Grace smiled, stepping out in her heels, her perfume carrying the faint scent of the city. "It's me, baby sister." They hugged, long and tight, as if trying to erase the years between them. But even in that warmth, Grace felt the roughness of Mary's hands, and Mary smelled the expensive silk on Grace's coat. They were sisters, yes, but from 2 different worlds now. Daniel, Mary's husband, came out to greet her, polite, respectful, but cautious. He'd always admired Grace's drive, though something about her eyes made him uneasy. That night, they sat down for dinner, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, cornbread, the same way Mama used to make it. Grace took small bites, more out of nostalgia than hunger. She looked around, her gaze resting on the little family photos on the wall, Mary and Daniel smiling under a church bell, a few nieces and nephews frozen in time. After dinner, as the crickets began to sing and Daniel went outside to fix something on the truck, Grace spoke softly. "Mary, I need to ask you something. Something only you can help me with." Mary turned to her sister, curious and concerned. Grace's voice trembled. "The doctors said I can't have children. I've tried everything, surgeries, treatments, prayers. Nothing works." Tears filled her eyes. "You've always had the heart I don't. The patience. The love. I want to ask you to carry my child." Mary froze. "What?" "I'll handle everything, the hospital, the doctors, the cost. You'll be safe, cared for. I just need you." The words hung in the air like heavy rainclouds. Mary looked down, her fingers trembling. She'd never imagined such a request, not from her own sister. Daniel returned just in time to hear the end. "Grace, you can't be serious," he said. But Grace was. She reached across the table, taking Mary's hand. "Please. You're my only hope." Mary's eyes filled with tears. Part of her wanted to say no, but then she looked at her sister, broken and desperate, and saw the same little girl who used to cry when their doll was missing. After a long silence, Mary whispered, "If this will make you whole, Grace, I'll do it." Grace smiled, the kind of smile that hides both relief and danger. That night, the sisters prayed together, holding hands by candlelight. One believed she was doing a holy thing. The other believed she had just been saved. Neither of them realized, they had both just stepped into a storm. The weeks after Grace's visit were filled with change. For the first time in years, the 2 sisters began to talk daily, laughing over childhood memories, cooking together, sitting on the porch, as the sun dipped behind the trees. Grace had moved in for a while to oversee the medical arrangements, but secretly, she was hungry for something deeper, the feeling of family again. Mary began her treatments quietly, her body adjusting to the miracle that would soon grow inside her. Grace was by her side through every appointment, holding her hand, watching her breathe. It was strange, the one who couldn't give life, caring for the one who could. Daniel watched from the sidelines. He admired Grace's strength, her calmness, her way of making everything feel possible. But he also saw the cracks behind her perfect smile. Late at night, when Mary was asleep, Grace would sit on the porch, staring at the stars, whispering to herself like someone who'd lost their way. One night, Daniel joined her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Grace smiled faintly. "Sleep doesn't visit me much anymore." They sat quietly for a while, listening to the sound of the crickets. Grace turned to him and said, "You're lucky, Daniel. You have someone who loves you without asking for anything back." Daniel looked at her, sensing something fragile in her voice. "You have your sister," he said softly. "She loves you like that." Grace nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know. But it's not the same. Sometimes, I wonder if I've spent my life chasing everything, except what really matters." Their eyes met, not in desire, but in understanding. Two broken hearts, quietly recognizing each other in the dark. Over the following months, as Mary's belly grew, the house filled with both laughter and tension. Grace cooked breakfast every morning, helped with the chores, even sang along with Mary when the radio played their mama's favorite gospel songs. But every so often, Daniel would catch Grace watching them, a longing in her eyes she couldn't hide. When Mary's morning sickness grew worse, Grace would take care of her, rubbing her back, whispering, "We're in this together." And she meant it. Because in her heart, Grace wasn't just waiting for a baby. She was falling, not for Daniel, not even for the life they shared, but for the feeling of belonging she hadn't known in years. Daniel, too, began to see her differently. Not as his wife's sister, but as a woman who carried pain behind her strength. And though neither spoke of it, the air between them grew heavy with something unsaid. Love was blooming in that little farmhouse, not the romantic kind, but the dangerous, confusing kind, the kind that doesn't know where it belongs. And as the baby grew, so did the unspoken truth between them all. This promise was becoming something far more complicated than anyone expected. By the 6th month, the little farmhouse no longer felt the same. What once was laughter had turned into silence, a silence filled with glances that said too much and words that came too late. Grace tried to keep her distance, but the walls of that small home made every feeling impossible to hide. She told herself she loved her sister, that everything she did was for Mary's good, but deep down, her heart was wandering into dangerous places. Daniel noticed it too. He had always respected Grace, but the late-night talks, the quiet smiles, the way she lingered near him when Mary wasn't around, it all began to weigh on his conscience. He avoided her eyes now, afraid of what he might see there, or what she might see in his. Then came the whispers. Neighbors began to notice Grace's long stays, the fancy cars that visited from the city, the gossip that spread faster than wildfire. Mary pretended not to hear, but every word burned her heart. And Grace, proud, hurt, and used to being admired, started to feel caged. She missed her world of control, the one where she didn't have to answer to anyone. One evening, a small argument changed everything. Mary had found Grace sitting on the porch, scrolling through her phone with tears in her eyes. "You're leaving again, aren't you?" Mary asked softly. Grace looked up. "Just for a few days. There's work I can't ignore." "But you promised to stay," Mary said. "The baby, my body, this isn't just your project, Grace. It's my life." Grace snapped, the city steel in her voice cutting deep. "Don't talk to me like I don't know sacrifice, Mary. I gave up everything to be here." Daniel stepped in. "Enough, both of you." But it was too late. The sisters' bond had cracked. That night, Grace packed her things quietly. Before she left, she placed her hand gently on Mary's belly and whispered, "You're doing this for us, don't forget that." The next morning, she was gone, back to the city, to her world of glass and quiet. Mary tried to carry on without her, but something had changed. Daniel's eyes were distant. Grace's absence echoed through the house. The promise that had once felt sacred now felt heavy, like a chain none of them could break. And when the baby finally came, small, perfect, and crying, Grace returned, not with tears of gratitude, but with lawyers and papers. Within days, she took the baby home to Atlanta. No goodbye, no thank you, just a hollow promise that she'd stay in touch. Mary watched her sister's car disappear down that dusty road, holding her empty belly and her husband's trembling hand. That was the day the promise began to feel like a curse. 2 years passed. The seasons changed, but the ache inside Mary never did. The baby Grace had taken was now a toddler, a little girl named Hope. Mary had never seen her, though she often dreamed of a tiny face with Grace's eyes and her own smile. Daniel had grown quiet. The man who once sang while fixing cars now spent evenings staring into the fields. Mary tried to forgive. She told herself it was God's plan. But deep down, something inside her had broken the day her sister left. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, Grace returned. Her luxury car pulled into the dusty yard like a ghost from another life. She stepped out, slimmer, paler, eyes weary, holding little Hope in her arms. Mary froze on the porch. Grace smiled, her lips trembling. Mary, this is her. The baby. Our promise. Mary's heart pounded. She reached out, touching the child's tiny hand, soft, warm, familiar. A part of her wanted to scream, another wanted to collapse. Inside, Daniel stood by the window, his jaw tight. Grace looked around the small farmhouse, tears filling her eyes. I miss this place, she whispered. I miss us. Mary said nothing. But the silence between them carried years of betrayal. Later that night, as the rain began to fall, Mary heard soft voices outside. She peeked through the curtain, Grace and Daniel standing near the porch, their words muffled by the storm. Mary stepped out, the wind whipping through her hair. What are you doing? She demanded. Grace turned, startled. Mary. Don't you marry me, she snapped. How long? How long have you two been talking? Daniel lowered his head. She needed someone to talk to. After everything. Mary's voice broke. Someone to talk to. Or someone to love. Grace cried. It wasn't like that. I was lost. He was kind. But I never what? Mary's voice shook. Never loved him. Never thought about what that would do to me. Daniel stepped forward. Mary, please. She stepped back, tears flooding her face. You both took something from me. First my body, now my peace. The thunder roared overhead as Grace fell to her knees, clutching the crying child. I'm sorry. I swear, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to feel loved, for once. Mary looked at her proud, broken sister, and suddenly saw not a rival, but a woman consumed by emptiness. Grace held out the baby. Take her, Mary. Please. I can't do this anymore. The storm raged on as Mary reached for the child, her own flesh, her own promise, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt life in her arms again. But forgiveness would not come easily. Not tonight. Not yet. Because sometimes, even love must drown before it learns how to breathe again. The rain stopped by morning. The yard smelled of wet earth and tears. Mary sat on the porch, holding little Hope, the child who carried both pain and promise in her small frame. Grace slept inside, exhausted, her fine clothes clinging to the chair like they no longer belonged to her. Daniel moved quietly, repairing the broken fence. He didn't look at Mary, and she didn't speak to him. Yet in the heavy silence, there was something new, not anger this time, but the slow birth of understanding. Grace woke near noon. Her eyes were swollen, her voice faint. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she whispered. Mary looked at her long and hard. "Maybe not," she said softly. "But forgiveness isn't something we earn. It's something we need to survive." Grace broke down, covering her face with her hands. "I thought I could buy happiness. I thought the world owed me peace, because I had money. But it doesn't work that way. You had nothing, Mary, yet you had love. I had everything, and I was still empty." Mary nodded slowly. "That's because love doesn't come from what we own. It comes from what we give." Grace's shoulders shook. "I gave nothing but pain." Mary reached over and took her sister's trembling hand. "Then start over. Give now." At that moment, Daniel walked up, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes were tired, full of regret. "Grace," he said quietly, "I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have let our pain turn into something that hurt Mary." Grace nodded. "We both broke her heart. But maybe we can help her heal it." Mary stood, holding hope close. "This child deserves peace. So do we. Let's stop tearing each other apart, and start being a family again." For a long moment, no one spoke. The baby reached out, touching Grace's cheek, as if reminding them all what mattered most. Tears flowed freely, but this time they weren't bitter. Grace decided to stay a few weeks. She helped around the house, cooked meals, laughed with Mary for the first time in years. They cried together at night, healing the old wounds that money and distance had deepened. Before leaving, Grace placed an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a letter, not of apology, but of surrender. "Dear Mary," it read. "You gave me life through this child, and through your grace, I've learned what love truly is. Keep her. Raise her. Let her grow where love is pure. I'll always be part of her story, but she's yours now, as she was always meant to be." When Mary finished reading, she pressed the letter to her heart, and looked out the window. Grace's car was gone, but this time, her departure didn't feel like loss. Daniel walked up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. Mary nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the first time, yes. I am." Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain and renewal. The promise of grace had been fulfilled, not in perfection, but in forgiveness. Because sometimes, the greatest love story isn't abo. In the end, love wasn't the grand mansion, or the empty bank accounts. It wasn't the rings, or the promises whispered over wine. It was forgiveness, raw, undeserved, but freeing. Grace thought money could heal what the heart had lost. Mary believed sacrifice would always be repaid with gratitude. But both learned that love isn't a transaction. It's a gift, fragile, quiet, sometimes painful, but real only when it expects nothing in return. When Mary forgave her sister, she didn't erase the betrayal. She simply chose peace over bitterness. And when Grace let go of pride, she found something her wealth could never buy: humility and redemption. Their story became more than pain. It became proof that even broken people can build something beautiful again. Because sometimes, God doesn't give us what we ask for. He gives us what will teach us how to love deeper. And that is the true promise of grace. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever loved someone who broke you, or forgiven someone who never said sorry, then the promise of grace was written for you. Because love isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's sacrifice, silence, and learning to let go of what you can't control. But when you forgive, when you choose peace over revenge, you don't just free them, you free yourself. So tell me, have you ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it? Have you ever seen love rise again from the ashes of betrayal? Share your story in the comments. Your words might heal someone else's heart tonight. And if you believe that love, real love, is stronger than pride, then like, share, and subscribe for more true stories that remind us, even when life breaks us apart, grace always finds a way to bring us home.